Just a moment.
When you think of game developers from Iceland, if you can name any, it's probably CCP Games, the studio behind EVE Online. A game that got so large and so corrupt that they created their own democratically elected council of player representatives. Those aren't quite the ambitions of another Icelandic studio. Sorry for what I'm about to do to your name. Mythkur Games, which as far as I can tell roughly translates to dark or obscure games, who present themselves as, in their own words, a medium-sized AA studio, and who just released an enhanced edition of their 2025 release and only game thus far, Echoes of the End. Don't ask me how the original was, I didn't play that version. What exactly is enhanced about this? Well, based on the description, patch notes, and player feedback, here's an incomplete list of things they added or updated. And there was a patch after release with a bunch of bug fixes and a photo mode. The latter is justified because the first thing I noticed with this game is that the environments are so damn stunning.
I'm pretty.
Iceland itself is full of amazing environments, and it certainly looks like they were a big inspiration for this game's look. Beyond that, they even nail the little things like sunlight streaming into caves or through ruins or tree branches, or the look of waterfalls and shallow creeks. There are two catches to this though. Along the main path and far away, things look great in performance mode, except for long-distance water reflections at the side of the screen here and there. And when you get closer to the edge of the main path, some of the visual compromises become more apparent. That and during camera cuts in the middle of cutscenes. So I guess that's 3, actually. This also extends to the character models, particularly the companions, who have some odd animation issues at times, and can also go completely incorporeal. It keeps them from blocking the player, but also leads to some awkward moments. One thing I will give the devs credit for is making sure that when the characters are talking in the field, their mouths actually move to what they're saying, and not in the visions of Mana talking like a puppet way, it actually moves to what they're saying. Animations of the player character otherwise look good, save for when she's sliding down a steep surface, which gives me Streets of Fury flashbacks. Anyway, there are these giant mouthwash-colored crystals called wards, which protect the locals from the chaos of the outside world. However, magic users called vestiges can channel, corrupt, and ultimately destroy wards. One of them, Zara, is doing this for the Empire, and another, Rin, is trying to protect them. The narrative tries to do a lot with Rin in particular. Her apparent reluctance to be a vestige, her strained relationship with her father/teacher, who is now dead, how her brother and mother see her, why she won't make physical contact with most people. And it does this not just through cutscenes, but mid-game chatter and the occasional dialogue section. This all but requires decent acting to work, and for this, Mythkur Games brought in several experienced, primarily Icelandic actors and actresses. Hell, some characters even look like the people who voice them. As a native English speaker, it's apparent that 1, the majority of the cast does have some acting chops, and 2, this isn't shown consistently. I liken this to the Alone in the Dark reboot, where they had experienced actors for the leads, but they sometimes just weren't hitting the right notes a scene or event called for. Here, each character voice seems to have some particular scenarios or emotions they can get across really well, and some they seem to struggle with. Like whenever Kor has to show he's worried about his sister Rin.
Rin! Watch out!
Or when Rin has to show worry, anxiety, or sadness.
Oh gods, no! Kellan! Kellan! Come on, you bastard! Look at me! Kellan!
It can be a bit distracting at times, as can some of the rest of the sound. The music is solid and fits well with the environment, and the sound effects are perfectly fine if they play. Sometimes it seems like some sound effects are either missing or not timed properly with what's going on, like seeing the rocks for a cave entrance collapse but the sound for them stopping as rocks are still falling, or seeing wood break but not hearing it. This is the part of the video where you're probably asking,
when are they gonna get to the fireworks factory?
And by fireworks factory, I mean gameplay. Echoes of the End can be divided into 2 parts, combat and puzzles. The combat sort of reminds me of those Lord of the Rings games from the GameCube PS2 era, but with some extra depth. There's a button for light and heavy melee attacks, one for dodge rolls, one for blocks and parries, and one for using the ability of whoever's following Rin at the moment. I usually hate parry systems because they tend to be really annoying to time properly, but I was pleasantly surprised by how well it was working for me. There were also a few shoulder button combinations for various vestige abilities, like draining health or doing the vestige equivalent of a force push. She can also fling objects at enemies or slam them into each other or into traps, which becomes more important as bigger units start showing up. In other words, Rin is quite capable, even though she has the Belmont curse of not being able to tolerate knee-deep water. And if shit goes south, not only are checkpoints plentiful, but the load times are relatively quick. Enemy variety tends to come in the form of same unit, different weapon. The Dolismen's soldiers and the Duthtar tend to be the main opposing force through the first few chapters, and they'll have a guy with a sword, a guy with a sling, a guy with an axe, a bigger guy with a club, a guy with a big-ass shield. This is occasionally broken up by a wild animal of some sort, but as to whether this is enough to keep things interesting, your mileage may vary. The melee I had little trouble with, but getting some of the vestige abilities to work as I wanted was kind of a pain at times, particularly getting enemies shoved in the direction I wanted, which is handled with the right stick. Even with the game highlighting enemies or objects, doing this while moving or while aiming for certain parts of the environment could be problematic depending on the perspective. These abilities take mana, and mana recharges by attacking enemies, which I like as a way to not be over-reliant on one mode of attack or the other, though it is possible to just ignore the vestige abilities and focus entirely on melee, at least on the normal difficulty. That's reinforced by the leveling and skill tree system, which unlocks new abilities that can do things like stun enemies or push them back, in addition to health or mana boosts, vestige ability boosts, or making the companion more capable. Levels are also gained by finding chests, which hold health and mana upgrades, journals, and objects of interest, all of which give experience, and Glimmerweave, which is used to create new armor and thus find new relics to equip, which give specific minor stat or ability boosts. I apologize if I'm making it sound like these are hidden out-of-the-way rewards because, well, they aren't. Calling Echoes of the End linear is like calling a David Cage game just a little pretentious. There are several visible and invisible walls or instant death drop-offs to keep Rin on a set path. In caves this makes sense, but out in the open, not as much. The level design is more or less like an American turnpike. You pay to get on one long road with a pull-off or exit to a gas station or some food stops every so often, but instead of gas or food, you find a chest. The paths to these chests are almost always in plain sight and usually involve a little platforming to get to, if any. As such, they don't feel quite as rewarding as they probably should. To be clear, I'm okay with a game being linear, particularly if the alternative is an aimless open world. But there were times Echoes of the End did this in excess. No, not that in excess, I meant, which brings me to the second part of the gameplay, puzzles, typically of the puzzle platforming variety. Rin can jump, grab ledges, climb certain walls, and swing from ropes, on top of using her vestige abilities to both shift platforms into place, and when she finds certain beacons or pads, become a Time Lord, Time Lady, and restore or destroy parts of the environment to progress. These start off relatively simple, and the controls for Rin's movement felt like second nature pretty quickly. But it also felt like the puzzle stayed too simple too long, and then suddenly ramped up in complexity once Rin got a companion who could freeze parts of the environment in time. There's a hint button, but whenever I used it, my companion would just state the obvious instead of helping. These require a completely different approach and mindset from the rest of the game, leading to not just a stop-start feel to the game's pace, but also possibly alienating people who aren't interested in one or the other. I'm lucky that I am interested in doing both, but I know a few people who would react to this like they just realized their milk went bad. Ultimately, Echoes of the End is a rough-around-the-edges action, puzzle, adventure with RPG elements game that I think is a solid first effort for an ambitious studio, but also has a particular niche of people who will stick with the game throughout. And when I say throughout, I mean about 12-ish hours, so this isn't going to be a one night off work and you're done kind of game. And at a suggested retail price of $40 US, I've seen it go on sale a couple of times since I started recording for this video, it's less of a risk compared to the quote-unquote modern standard full-price AAA title. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to go watch that clip of the commentator watching Iceland beat England in the 2016 Euros for the 28th time.
Iceland er að fara á Stade France!
Myrkur Games. Myrkur Games. Myrkur Games. Myrkur Games. Duthtar. 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 Duthtar.